People swallow dozens of spiders in their sleep over a lifetime. This fact is often presented as scientifically proven, but in reality it is completely made up. There is no scientific study and no documented case that confirms people swallowing spiders while sleeping. The idea seems believable only because it has been repeated many times, not because it reflects reality. Spiders by nature avoid humans because they are extremely sensitive to vibrations, body heat, and air movement, and a sleeping person constantly breathes, moves, and creates airflow, which spiders perceive as a threat. A human bed is not a calm or safe environment for them, and a human mouth even more so. For this myth to be true, spiders would have to ignore vibrations, heat, and air movement, and at the same time several protective reflexes in the human body would have to fail simultaneously, which contradicts both spider behavior and human physiology. The myth spread only because it is unpleasant and easy to remember. People use only 10% of the brain. There is no study that shows that humans use only 10% of their brain. On the contrary, neuroimaging demonstrates that throughout the day, almost all areas of the brain are active. They just do not work simultaneously and instead activate depending on tasks and the person's state. Even during rest or sleep, the brain does not shut down and continues to process information, support bodily functions, and form memory. If 90% of the brain were truly unused, damage to those areas would have no consequences. But in reality, even minor injuries to specific regions can lead to serious impairments in speech, memory, movement, or personality. The myth arose from misinterpretations of early scientific statements and from the appealing idea of hidden potential, which sells well in motivational books and movies but does not reflect how the human brain actually works. Water in a sink spins differently in different hemispheres of the Earth. The claim that water in a sink rotates in different directions depending on the Earth's hemisphere is often presented as an effect of the Coriolis force, but under everyday conditions this is not true. The Coriolis effect does exist, but it is noticeable only on very large scales, such as the atmosphere or the oceans, and it has virtually no influence on the movement of water in a sink or a bathtub. On such a small scale, its effect is so weak that it is overwhelmed by even the smallest external factors. In reality, the direction in which water rotates is determined by the shape of the sink, the slope of the surface, the way the water enters the basin, tiny irregularities in the walls, and even random movements of the water before it drains. This is why in the same sink, the water can rotate in different directions on different days. The myth became widespread because of dramatic demonstrations and oversimplified explanations, but from a physics perspective, it is not supported under normal household conditions. Psychological tests accurately describe personality. Most popular tests are designed for generalization rather than deep analysis, so they reduce the complex and changing human psyche to a few categories or scales. A person's personality is not a fixed value, and it can change even depending on the current situation in which the person is taking the test. In addition, test results largely depend on how a person perceives themselves and how they want to appear in the eyes of others. People often answer not according to how they actually behave, but according to what they consider correct or desirable. Even scientifically validated methods are used only as tools for approximate assessment of individual traits, and not as a final description of personality. The popularity of this myth is explained by the fact that people enjoy receiving simple explanations of themselves, but from a psychological point of view, no test can fully and accurately describe a person. If you don't remember a dream, you didn't have it. The claim that if a person does not remember a dream, then they did not have one is incorrect. In reality, all people experience dreams several times each night, regardless of whether they are aware of them after waking up. Dreams occur mainly during the rapid eye movement phase of sleep, but memory of them is preserved only if awakening happens during this phase, or very close to it. If a person wakes up later, the brain quickly erases the content of the dream because it is not considered important information for everyday functioning. Forgetting dreams is a normal function of the brain and not a sign that dreams did not occur. During sleep, the brain processes emotions, memories, and experiences, and dreams are a byproduct of this process rather than a message that must be consciously stored. This is why most dreams disappear from memory within a few minutes after waking up, even if they were vivid. People see the same colors in the same way. In reality, color is not a property of an object, but the result of the brain's processing of light signals. The eye only detects wavelengths of light, and the brain interprets them as specific colors, and this process can differ from person to person. Color perception is influenced even by fatigue or the state of the nervous system. Beyond physiology, experience and context play a major role. The brain constantly adjusts colors depending on lighting conditions, comparing objects to one another so the same color can appear different in shadow, in bright light, or next to other shades. This is why well-known optical illusions occur, where people genuinely see different colors in the same image. Therefore, even though we use the same names for colors, the perception of color is not exactly the same for everyone. The body can forget how to breathe if you think about it. The claim that the body can forget how to breathe if a person starts thinking about it is false. Breathing is an automatic vital process and is controlled by specialized centers in the brain that operate independently of conscious awareness. Even when a person pays attention to their breathing or tries to control it, automatic mechanisms continue to monitor oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood and adjust breathing without conscious effort. Conscious control over breathing is possible only temporarily and within very limited limits. If a person stops breathing or breathes incorrectly, the brain quickly intervenes and restores a normal rhythm, even if this causes an involuntary breath or a feeling of discomfort. The sensation that breathing has gone wrong is usually associated with anxiety or increased focus on bodily sensations rather than any real threat to the body. People feel when someone is looking at them. In reality, this feeling arises from the way attention and memory work, rather than from any hidden sensor or intuitive signal. The human brain constantly scans the surrounding environment for potential threats, and when another person's gaze aligns with our direction of attention, we tend to assign special significance to that moment. Selective memory plays an important role. People clearly remember the moments when they turned around and actually saw someone looking at them, but pay little attention to the many times when this feeling was not confirmed. This creates the illusion that the feeling of being watched often works. In addition, small movements, shadows, changes in lighting, or peripheral vision can subconsciously draw attention, and the brain then explains the reaction as intuitive anticipation. In reality, this is the result of processing random signals rather than evidence of a special sixth sense. Multitasking makes us more efficient. The brain is not capable of performing several complex tasks at the same time, and instead rapidly switches between them. Each such switch requires time and cognitive resources, which leads to increased fatigue, reduced concentration, and a higher number of mistakes. Rather than speeding up work, multitasking often slows task completion and reduces quality. In addition, constant switching of attention interferes with the formation of deep understanding and long-term memory. The brain works most effectively when it focuses on a single task, especially if it requires thinking, analysis, or creativity. The impression of increased productivity during multitasking is usually an illusion, because people judge speed of action rather than real results. Strong motivation always leads to success. Motivation by its nature is unstable and changes depending on mood, fatigue, stress, and external circumstances. Even very strong initial enthusiasm weakens over time, especially when a person faces difficulties, routine work, or a lack of quick results. In reality, success much more often depends not on the strength of motivation, but on systems, habits, and environment. Regular actions, clear structure, support, and defined steps allow progress even when motivation is almost absent. This is why people who rely only on inspiration often give up, while those who build stable habits and processes achieve results without constant emotional highs. The myth of all-powerful motivation is appealing because it promises a simple path to success, but in practice, consistency plays the decisive role rather than emotional impulse. Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you enjoyed it, I would appreciate a like and a subscription. Have a great day.